My name is Kris and I also have James Haywood with us today, and we're going to present to you some teaching strategies that we use when we're running our online ESL lessons. There will be a recording of this webinar that we'll send to you likely within 24 hours of finishing the webinar, so you don't need to worry about taking notes. You'll get a recording. And of course, if you have any questions after the webinar that you didn't think of during class, you can send us an email at our email addresses. We'll also pass around our personal contact details by email after the webinar. This is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to run through some basic pieces of technology that we use when we are running our online ESL lessons. We're going to do a quick comparison of video conferencing systems. We're going to go over what you can teach online, so from a lesson content perspective to populate your lessons, as well as homework for between lessons. And the crux of our webinar is going to be a demonstration, and then we'll leave some time for QA at the end. Just so you know, there's a QA function built into the video conferencing system that we're using today. It's at the bottom right hand of your panel. We'll be manning the QA, so if you want to leave questions there, we'll hope to answer them live during the webinar, and then we'll take up some of the questions at the end. So let's begin. What do you need to teach online? I find that a lot of teachers that are just starting to get into the online teaching space think that you need a lot of different pieces of technology. But actually, what you need to teach online is quite simple. You need a really good video conferencing system. So that would be like Zoom, which we are on right now, or Skype, or Google Hangouts, or GoToMeeting, or WebEx. You need to be very comfortable with your video conferencing system, because that's the piece of technology that you're going to be interacting with on a daily basis for all your lessons. You need lesson content. You need something to populate your lessons with. You need some sort of basis to run your lessons. That's where Off the Class comes in. And most importantly, you need to be able to accept payments for your classes. So that would be a payment gateway such as PayPal. For video conferencing systems, we actually like to use the system that we're on right now. It's called Zoom. And the reason we like it, if you put a comparison between Zoom and something like Skype, which is also very popular, Skype seems to be a default video conferencing system that a lot of teachers default to because they already have access to it, they already know how to use it, and their students already have it. But the reason we like Zoom, most importantly, is it performs extremely well in low bandwidth situations. So if you're teaching students who have a weaker internet connection, it performs very well compared to Skype. It also has a great screen sharing functionality. It has great drawing tools, so you can run through a lot of different annotations and draw on your screen while you're screen sharing. That will be demoing today. You can record your classes, so you can give copies of the recordings to your students to watch them between classes. And if you're teaching young learners online, a lot of them will really enjoy, parents will really appreciate that you're recording the classes for parents to review later at a later time if they require it. And the structure works off lesson links. So there's a very simple joining procedure for your students. You create a link for each student, and then each time they want to join a lesson, they just click a link. You don't have to have like Skype, you don't have to have your students added as friends. And the nice thing about using the lesson links to create your classes is you keep a separation between your personal life and your professional life. If you're using one Skype account for both your personal contacts and for your lessons, things can get a bit jumbled up. And what about the cost? Zoom actually is free if you want to just be running one-on-one lessons. you can use the basic free account. If you want to be able to do group lessons, so that would be more than one student participating at a time, you need a pro account, and it's $10 a month. And now I'm going to pass it over to James, and he's going to talk about different things you can teach online.
Okay, thanks, Kris. So my name's James Haywood. I'll just do a really quick introduction about myself. I've been teaching for quite a number of years, and I've been teaching exclusively online for about 3. I've clocked up now just over 4,200 hours online, so most of that has been with young learners. I teach almost exclusively Turkish students, although I have had experience with other teachers, and online teaching has been hugely successful for me, both from a professional point of view, but also very personally rewarding. I get a lot out of online teaching, and I enjoy the experience with the smaller number of students in my class. So that's a little bit about me. So I'll run through today the things that you can see on the screen in front of you now. So I guess one of the major considerations when you take anybody online, one of the first things you'll need to do is find out whether they're actually going to be following a curriculum with you, or whether you're going to be offering supplementary practice to something that somebody has already been doing. My experience is that it's rare that you will actually teach a curriculum, although the younger the student, the more often that is the case. And if that is the case, it's vital that you get the information that you need from the parent, or often you can get some of the curriculum on the school. You do want to be doing that particularly with young students, because the parents are very much focused on what the child needs, and so you really need to be following what is happening at the school and what the expectations of the students are. If you're offering supplementary courses, there's a lot more that's available for you as a teacher already to use online, and obviously you can negotiate with the student what your goals are going to be. One thing I would point out, if you're going to be offering supplementary classes, so if a student perhaps is for example, already working, and they're suddenly finding that they're going up in management, or the company is now having contact with an American subsidiary, or they're going to be doing video conferencing themselves, and that they suddenly need to reboost their English again, it's really important that you find out what the student already knows, but more importantly, what their goals are. And a lot of people I find who teach online sometimes feel that because they speak English as a native teacher, or they've already taught in a classroom, they often miss to sort of focus on that at the very beginning. So anytime you get a student, I really think it's vital to first of all find out what their goals are, even in the short term. In terms of what you can teach online, it is slightly different to a classroom, as some of you probably already are teaching online, and most of you within the classroom, in traditional classroom environment. You can still teach speaking, reading, listening, and writing. Obviously, most people focus almost exclusively on speaking. That can be a good thing, but it also means that you need to have a lot of really good resource available, because simply having a camera in front of you and only watching each other's face can become incredibly boring and also monotonous. So if you're only doing speaking, it's really important, actually really important for the student, that you have something else that's visual. Even the slide that we have now, that's focused the listener, or the student is focusing on that at the same time. Reading texts, I'm going to demonstrate how I teach reading online. It's something that I feel I've had a lot of success with. There are some really great sites out there now. Oxford House, Random House actually have some sites there as well where you can get free texts, and also with the number of free texts available online now, you can actually import those and format them in a format that's more suitable for your student. Listening activities, obviously they can be quite successful, but there's a limit to how much listening, active listening, the student will be doing with you, apart from listening to yourself, because if you do a YouTube video, if you play a YouTube video, obviously it becomes a very passive activity, and you really don't want to be doing too much of that online. Writing is the challenging one to do online. One of the first things I would recommend is that you get any student that you teach online to start using the chat functionality with you. It's actually a very good mechanism for testing something like contractions, moving sentences into different tenses, using negation. Those kinds of things can be very effective, and especially with people who want to avoid. Not many students really want to focus on their writing unless they're doing an academic course, or if you're doing TOEFL or IELTS-based lessons. You do need a way, so the chat function really helps there, and we're also starting to develop some writing materials ourselves for use online. One thing that I find that a lot of online teachers do forget is that because you are in a different physical space to the student, you should make use of everything that's around you in the classroom. I know I'm in a blank space at the moment, but always remember that whatever is in the student's room behind them, make use of it, because once you personalize what the students got with them, they will always learn better. So if there's a whole lot of books there, or they've got stuff on the table, any items or possessions that are around them, it's really important that you can try and involve them. You know, when you're teaching prepositions of location or you're teaching phrasal verbs, you can really make use of what's around you, teaching nouns, vocabulary, all of that kind of stuff. Another thing that a lot of teachers forget is it really does need to be personal to the student. And I think when you go online, you're not in a classroom, because you're not in a classroom environment with a lot of students, it's even more important to focus on what that particular student wants. And some teachers do forget that you really do need to personalize every situation that you're in. Another thing is be very aware of the student's proficiency in his or her native language. And what I mean by that is, if you're teaching a young learner, be very careful of the concepts that you're going to start introducing in English, because a lot of the online material that is available is not written for particular age groups. And what you may know as a 12-year-old English student, a Japanese student or a Turkish student may not be aware of at the same age group. So there are lots of, the idea of what I'm saying there is be very aware of their own proficiency, but also the cultural concepts that they will have been exposed to for their particular age group, what can be suitable or obviously unsuitable. And that leads into keeping the concepts that you teach really relevant to the age group. A lot of teachers online also scramble for materials, and so I find that they actually fail to teach what that student would normally be learning in his or her own language at that age group. They often don't bring in relevant grammar points in the English as a foreign language or English as a second language class. So we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so in terms of content that you need, one of the things I didn't mention before is you'll probably notice that I'm set back quite far, even though I'm in a small screen, I'm set back quite far from my actual computer. One piece of technology I really recommend, apart from the three things that Kris mentioned before, is that investing in a small webcam that takes you a little bit further away from the space of the student is really good for their personal space. Most of the webcams that exist on computers obviously are placed right on top of the screen, and if you aren't sharing the screen, it can actually be for the student a little bit intimidating to have you so close up. I find that pushing this back actually, it allows them to have a little bit of space. And if I need to, in the normal classroom where I teach, I have a whiteboard. I can stand up and actually be writing on the board and almost conducting as though I'm in a normal classroom. And some of you will have seen MOOCs and university lecturers operating online in that system, and I recommend it for online teaching anyway. So secondly, obviously probably the one thing I've noticed being in my experience as an online teacher is it's super important to have visually pleasing, stimulating and engaging content, and that means lots and lots of images. It has to be bright and colorful, even for adult learners, and possibly even more for adult learners, because they are often short on time and really tired often when they get to class, if they're coming after work or on the weekend, and they're trying very hard to squeeze their English lessons in. I think you've got to make an enormous effort to make sure that the content of the content is of a high quality, that it looks professional, because that reflects really well on you, and that there's a consistency in what you're doing. Obviously, there are a lot of sites out there that are hugely popular amongst teachers, busyteacher.org, and I think actually I can stick with busyteacher.org. Obviously a huge amount of content available online, but you need to be super careful about the quality of what you're actually going to share on screen. So the one slide that we've picked up here, I think you can see very small amount of text that the student can grasp, nice bright colors, and really strong imagery, and everything's labeled as it should be, which is really good for online teaching. Okay, so I think the next slide we can go. So one of the biggest issues is going to finding online content, and we started to develop that because in all of the online teaching that I had, I realized that I wanted to have something that looked professional and consistent with all of my students, and that obviously teaching online, most of the major publishing companies have been a little bit slow to get all of their wonderful books into an online format, and I'm sure that most of you do struggle in some sense. If you're not already cramming to produce your own lessons, you're probably often not able to find exactly the content you want. So we developed a site, Off to Class. It's pretty simple to use. I'll show it to you in a moment, but it really focuses on grammar. We have a lot of reading, speaking, vocabulary, and we're now getting into idioms. We hope very soon to develop a business English category as well, and then hopefully get into the standardized tests by the end of this summer, time in August, September, possibly developing an IELTS course, because there's a lot of content that needs to become available for online teachers. We've currently got about 330 lessons. And I'll show you that each of the lessons come with there's a slide-by-slide lesson, so we do a lot of the preparation for you, but we want the teacher to be valuable in giving the product, so we actually add some notes for you that you may or may not use, depending on your experience and your comfort in teaching already. But we find that because I've been teaching online, that these lesson plans really are good for sharing. And if we go on to the next slide, one of the other things that is really important about online teaching, and that so many people get stuck with, is homework. Obviously, if you have a student and you're teaching them online, just like in a bricks and mortar classroom, you need to keep them engaged outside. And obviously you can't give them a slip of paper. So one of the biggest challenges for me as a teacher online was, what can I do about homework? I can't physically give them a piece of paper, and I don't want to be managing 100 emails coming back to me and then printing things out and marking them. So we have actually developed, for each of our lessons, we've loaded a self-study activity. It's homework, which comes after the student actually logs in and will fill that in online, and the system will more or less mark the homework for you, which is really good. Whether the student chooses to do it or not, it actually takes a lot of the pressure off of you as a teacher, that we've already supplied it there for you. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I will bring you into the website. Some of you may have already logged in, but as you can see, it's a fairly simple design. We want it to be as easy to use as possible. So this is what you'll come to when you log in. You'll see up here we've got the levels. If you click on all levels here, it will remove all of the lessons, and if you simply click on what you're going to be teaching today, it will then start highlighting, and you can choose from those lessons that are there. But I'll keep all the lessons highlighted at the moment. We've got them organized in categories. We've kept very much to the format, I suppose, of a grammar book. And we will be adding, although it's here, we will be adding this search function. It will be available for everybody very soon. We're currently testing it at the moment very hard, but we know that it's going to be a good addition to the class. So getting on to the lessons themselves, all you need to do when you come in and you pick, and what I'll do now as well is I will just start using some of the annotations, and I'll just remind you that these are actually within the Zoom system. So if you use Zoom with Off to Class, any of the annotations that I draw today throughout the webinar will be available to you to use also, and I use them a lot. So you can see here, as I said, we've got the different categories. All you need to do simply is pick one out and then click on a drop-down list. You click the lesson that you want to, I'll just go for the first one here, so Introduction to Phrasal Verbs. and you can either come across to the rocket here. There are 3 buttons that you can see down here. The rocket will launch the lesson. If I click on this one, it will preview the lesson, and the 3rd icon on the right is to display the homework. So I'll do those straight away. Just quickly, you can preview the homework here, which brings up a small screen. It essentially gives you the information around the objectives of the lesson and what we do and don't cover, leads you into perhaps other lessons in the category, and then something that we might think you need to keep in mind. So if you want to teach that, you can launch the program directly from the rocket here, but we're going to return to the main screen. We're not going to launch it directly. And you can also see the homework by clicking here, and that will load for you. The student can't fill in from here, but you can at least show them and make sure you can kind of concept check the homework. You can click here, maybe get them to do 1 or 2 before they start, before you actually send the homework at the end. So I'll come back to the main page, and I'm going to launch the lesson. It will ask you about enrolling students, and I'll go through that. But essentially, if you enroll a student, you will then be able to send that student the homework automatically at the end of the lesson. So I'll enroll a student, and then it will take me into the classroom. So this is what the classroom looks like. I'll notice on the left we've got the teacher notes, and on the right here will be what the student will be viewing. Okay, now the first thing you do is you probably want to get rid of the teacher notes because you don't want the student to be doing that. So in the top right hand corner of the screen, you'll be able to see a small toggle button up here. So when I click on that, what will happen is the teacher notes will move from the page. And what I can do is get rid of those. I can log in to another device, whether it's an iPad or a phone. And if you log into Off to Class using the other device, the notes will come up for you, and you'll be able to see these teacher notes here will show to you on the phone. So once I've done that, and I'm in the classroom, the student's now ready to go. On the front page of all of our slides, you'll see obviously the series to which it belongs, the number within the series, and a couple of very short descriptions of what you'll be finding inside that lesson. So all of our lessons simply follow a pretty straightforward format. We tend to get students quickly involved in like a self-discovery thing. We don't push too much grammar at the beginning, but try to get them started on something. Obviously, this isn't an intermediate to an upper intermediate class, so the student already knows quite a lot about English. So we'll do some of that, find out for you what they know, and as you go along, we have lots of different activities that they can start to do. So using the annotations, you can start asking them to match which one they think is correct. You can put ticks in as you go across. You can focus them on the things you want. You can focus on the form, get them to change various stuff. Obviously with annotations, if students are struggling to speak, you can always write on the screen for them. That keeps you silent, and they'll pick up on that immediately if they need to do it. And if you're quite adept at drawing, you can get into actually drawing pictures of things and ask them to help you out there. So that's essentially how it really works. Most of the lessons run through to about 20 to 30 slides, depending on the level and what's being covered in the lesson itself. I'll just take you to the notes, the 4 colored boxes at the bottom of the screen. Obviously, I have enrolled a student at the beginning of the lesson, and you can see that the student's name automatically shows here. You can also do it from here at any point during the lesson. The second one I'll show you is about taking notes. If you want to take notes about your students' progress for any reason, or something that they tell you that you want to be notified at a later time, you simply put the note in here, and it will come through to us. So I don't know, did well today, or struggling with the lesson, and you can just submit that. That will go through to the student's record. The other thing, obviously, if you find an error, you find something you don't like or you do like about the lesson, please leave us a comment here. Feedback really helps us to improve the lesson content, and if you put feedback into this box, we know exactly on which lesson and on which slide you were looking at the time. So it will come back to us and we know exactly what you're talking about. So you don't need to put in too much detail. Obviously, I won't click on close the classroom now, but we'll see that at the end. Okay, what I'll do next is take you through a couple of the screens. We'll show you the homework. This is a pretty typical summary for grammar. We have a lot of these, and I would really recommend that when you're doing those, you can use the annotations to draw in the student's focus exactly where you want it. So we have a lot of grammar and grammar point and focus on that kind of thing. Secondly, we'll have this type of screen which has a little more detail in it. You'll get the students to do some reading. There'll be a piece of information at the bottom and then another explanation on the other part of the slide. After that, we'll go into a kind of controlled activity. Everyone's familiar with the gap fill activity, and we have lots of those. And again, you can really use the annotations to get them to do these quite well. Also remember, when you're doing the activities, adapt as you go along. Once they've done all these sentences and they've got all of them correct, why not go back and ask the student to put them all in the negative, get them to put them into another tense. You can get them to try to use these words in another context. So don't just do what we've shown you on the slide. We've tried to leave it as open as possible, and often you'll find there will be additional things apart from the answers. There'll be suggestions for teaching in the teacher notes themselves. Going on to another quick activity, we have lots of matching type things. So you can, again, using the annotations here, you can probably just come along and do the standard matching. With Zoom, I'll also point out, you can, if you feel confident with your students, you can actually hand them or give them the controls of your screen and they can come in and do the drawing themselves. I'd only do it with students with whom you've had a lot of experience or who feel quite comfortable with computers, and I generally find that if you're teaching age groups between about 10 to 14, that's probably the age group that loves it the most. Adults like the annotations, but they're not really interested in doing them. Another thing that I'll just show you is we've also added reading activities recently. Reading is a very difficult thing to do with a lot of learners. They tend not to want to do it in class. They find it's a very passive activity, but we've changed that and tried to really bring it alive on screen. Obviously, we'll start in a very typical way of introducing reading activity with visual prompts and questions. You can use the annotation as you want, and once you've got the discussion going, then we'll bring in some more images and eventually the text. And on the left-hand side, we will also bring in any vocabulary that we think is going to be challenging for that particular group. All of our activities, all of the reading activities also come with an extensive homework. And I will actually log into one of those here. So this was the reading activity that I've got here, and at the end of it, I'll just go to the end, there'll be a few more prompts for questions, but we also have really good activities that you can then, the student can then do a self-study using the same text. So there's actually a deeper view of the same text for the student to go in and have a look at. We've got multiple choice, the standard multiple choice questions that do require a deeper reading of the text, followed by true and false type activities, putting things in order in which they were delivered by the author in the text, and then even promoting some writing activities. So some gap fills using some of the language in context, and then at the end they can simply write in some activities, some writing, open-ended writing activities for you as well. After that, speaking activities. Obviously, speaking activities something that a lot of online teachers don't prepare for very much, but it's something that we've thought about. And again, it's really important to have visually stimulating stuff. They don't just want to be looking at you, no matter how interesting you are as a teacher. It's really important to have pictures, because there are going to be times when you stumble, and if you've got something that the student can concentrate on, it will really assist them. So we tend to introduce the pictures without the words on them, find out obviously what the student already knows, then add a bit of vocabulary, get them to start to talk, and then for each of these, after we introduce the vocabulary, we have a reading text, which the focus here is still on speaking, but we try to get them to do a little bit of reading to put that vocabulary in context. And at the end of the speaking activity, there are prompts, and hopefully the student will be able to start producing that language themselves. Finally, what I'll show you about the site is we've got some really good vocabulary lessons. We've spent a lot of time looking for great visuals. We try to bring in the vocabulary and highlight what we think the student will be interested, or this lesson obviously is focused on dairy foods, or dairy and milk. So lots and lots of bright images there for you to use also. As we move along, one other thing that I always have open is an online dictionary. Obviously that's not part of our site, but I always have it there. I also have the online thesaurus, and obviously YouTube is available as well. So that's essentially our site. I'm going to go back to showing you here. Once you get to the end of the lesson, you want to send homework to the student. So as you close the classroom, it's going to do that automatically for you. And the student will be sent the homework. So what I'm going to do is just come back to closing the classroom. And then the student will be able to log in. I won't go into enrolling students here today, because if you're on the site, we've got a video about that. And if you come in and find your students, then you can check your students individually, go into their homework assignments, and I can actually see what the student has been assigned, what has been completed, what's outstanding, and here I can bring up something that's already been reviewed. So I'm going to go into that. This student did a lesson on repeated actions in the past. On the left-hand side is the answer key, and the right-hand side, the student's answers. Actually, that one doesn't actually show that he filled anything out, so I might just go back in and have a look at another student's so we can get a better one. Okay, so we'll go in and have a look at this student's answers, and you can see here the student has filled in the lesson, the answers here on the right. And where it differs from the answer key, the text will actually come up in orange. It may not necessarily be incorrect. Sometimes students can come up with an alternative answer, but we've put the text in orange because it highlights, well, it basically emphasizes, draws the teacher's attention that it's time to correct, or at least have a look at it. And we've got a little icon over here that then you can click that over to any question. You can give some feedback to the student, and then you can save that, and the student will be able to see it when it logs in. Also, one thing I failed to mention before is when the student is actually completing the homework, we give them the summary slides for the lesson. So they won't be able to see everything, but we give them the essentials of what was shown in the previous lesson with you, so that they can go back and review those as they're doing the lesson, and that should assist them greatly. If we come back to the home page, I will just show you one other thing about our site. If you're using it and you do want to get in contact with us, obviously you can email us, but the easiest thing is in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen here. You can see the small green circle. If you click on that, you'll be able to immediately send us a lesson, and you can just type it in, and the message will come directly through to us, and we will answer you as soon as we can. So any problems, any feedback you have, you can just send it to us straight away. Okay, I think that's probably all I needed to cover with you about the site. And I might Yeah, I think, Kris, I think I've covered everything there.
Yeah, I think that's great. We are open to questions now. You can use the QA function at the bottom of the screen.